Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Gutowski, I have a handful of questions to ask you. They cover a whole range of different issues, so we'll move across different things that we've discussed today. First of all, in relation to your evidence that staff levels were reduced and you ended up with just one other person in the blood policy part of the work you were doing, given that hepatitis was an issue and by then you knew a compensation scheme was pending, did you raise concerns about the lack of staffing and support that you had?
Yes.
And what was the response that you received?
Nothing. In the end, I managed to recruit a casual executive officer to help out, but that was under my own initiative.
In relation to the Skipton Fund, you indicated in your evidence that you thought that perhaps the look-back programme had been used as a means of identifying beneficiaries. The evidence the inquiry's heard so far suggests that the look-back data wasn't used as a means of informing people about the Skipton Fund. Can you shed any further light on that?
No, that was just something that sprung into my mind that could have been a way of obtaining the information, but I was just trying to be helpful.
But as far as you're aware, you're not sure what was done or what wasn't?
No.
Okay. We had a discussion earlier today about your email detailing your understanding of the position with non-A, non-B hepatitis drawn from the Bergin report.
Yes.
I'm asked to ask you whether you ever read the judgment in A and Others, which was the hepatitis litigation court judgment in 2001. Was that something you ever looked at?
Not that I can remember.
Another part of your evidence, you said you were sticking to the line to take because that was the position on the basis of the information you had before you. And you said that if something had come to light, then the policy would have been considered again. What would be required to come to light to prompt reconsideration of the line to take?
I'm assuming we're talking here about self-sufficiency, are we?
Calls for a public inquiry.
Calls for a public inquiry. Basically, that there was evidence that there had been wrongdoing on behalf of the department or other interested parties. If hard evidence had been presented, then I would have considered it and then made suggestions or recommendations to senior officers and ministers that this could be grounds to consider for public inquiry. But it would have had to be pretty compelling evidence.
With the benefit of hindsight, does the line to take process, the fact that you're drawing on previous lines to take, does that process mean that the inertia in that regard is effectively built into the system?
It shouldn't. I mean, you should obviously look at lines to take that have been in place for a while. You should look at them critically, as I said, on the basis of all the evidence that's coming to light. But if there's nothing new had been put to you, and there's nothing then to consider in terms of overtaking a pre-existing policy.
We saw in a couple of documents earlier responses to Carol Grayson. I'm asked to ask you what steps were taken to investigate the allegations made by her and other strong vocal campaigners and the documents they provided.
We would have taken them on board. Obviously, when we get letters like that and documents like that, we don't just ignore them. We would have considered them and made comments on them. If that's I'm assuming that's a letter from Carol Grayson that I gave a long, detailed response to.
I think it's the fact that there were a number of letters and emails and meetings, I understand from the question, that were provided by her and by other.
We would have taken those comments and those considerations on board, yes.
And finally, I'm asked to ask, was the civil service position of a defensive line taken at the expense of a position adopting a factually accurate line?
I don't think so, no. I think the two are mutually exclusive.
I'm just going to turn my back, sir, and check if there are any other questions. No, nothing. Sir, do you have any questions?
Yes, I do. I have one. Hugh Nicholas, was he Dr. Nicholas?
Yes.
What was his specialty?
Oh, you put me on the spot now. I think he may have been a haematologist, but I'm guessing.
You're guessing?
I am totally guessing. I honestly cannot remember.
Mr. Gutowski, is there anything else you would like to say at this point before we finish?
No, I just hope that the three witness statements that I provided and the evidence I've given today is helpful to the inquiry in its deliberations on this very important matter.
Well, I don't suppose that when you were a one-man band as the litigation unit of the medical division, and later when you were head of blood policy between June 2003 and December 2004, you ever imagined that what was done or not done would be subject to such scrutiny some 20 years later?
No.
But I'd like to thank you for helping us as best you can now recall, albeit with the odd bit of guesswork, to understand how your views and recollections fit with the words that we know that you used at the time. And giving me, anyway, a sense of what it must have been like to be there under pressure, understaffed, not being listened to when you asked for further recruitment, dealing with the issues of the day. I'd also like to thank you that you've given Council an opportunity through you to explore the way in which the policy developed, in England at any rate, of creating a fund which became the Skipton Fund, and the various, the evolution of that idea. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we'll be sitting again on the 27th of June when we'll be hearing from Sir John Major. We are hearing from Sir John Major on the 27th of June.
Now that, just so that people are aware, is a Monday. It's unusual for us. We're having a longish week that week. So we start on Monday the 27th at 10 o'clock.
Indeed.
John Major.